The 4th of July wouldn't be complete without some fireworks, and thanks to Joe Toussaint and Paul Mulcahy, we even got some in college basketball recruiting on Tuesday. And yes, I am cheesy enough to have just made that joke.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and I want to thank you for joining us for your first listen or watch of the day. Hopefully you woke up to not too many firework debris on your ground. Hopefully you got all your fingers and toes intact from a great 4th of July. I'm recording this just about an hour after Joe Toussaint committed to Texas Tech, trying to get it in before all the festivities kick off because, man, in my neighborhood, things get wild. And so hopefully we won't hear any loud bangs in the background from that. Coming up on the show today, we do want to talk about Paul Mulcahy's commitment to Washington. Want to talk about the proposed transfer portal getting down to 30 days. But first, I want to start with Joe Toussaint's commitment to Texas Tech. And that's for two reasons. Number one, this West Virginia saga continues to be a thing. And number two, this is not at all where I thought Joe Toussaint was going to go. I really thought he was going to Kansas State. I'll speak for Andy, my co-host, Andy Patton, who said the same thing. In fact, when he and I were texting about it after the commitment, Andy said, quote, "Oh, wow, K-State fans about to be in shambles." And I imagine that is indeed what's happening in the Little Apple right about now, following the news that Joe Toussaint is not headed to Manhattan, Kansas, but rather to Lubbock, Texas, where either way he was going to stay in the Big 12, but also picked the Red Raiders not only over K-State, but also over Pitt. And so, listen, for Coach Grant McCasland in his first offseason to get some of the recruits that he's gotten in the transfer portal to win this specific one over both Jeff Capel and Jerome Tang, like, that's big time. So Grant McCasland, congrats to you, sir. Keep it rolling. Keep in mind that he just recently landed Devin Cambridge out of Arizona State. Now, it's interesting with Joe Toussaint because we already knew he would definitely not be returning to West Virginia. We learned that on Monday. He announced that and had narrowed it down to this threesome of Pitt, Texas Tech, and K-State. And so we knew that would be coming at some point on Tuesday. What's interesting about it on that West Virginia side is I've been assuming all along that it was going to be the transfers were the ones leaving West Virginia in the wake of the Bob Huggins stuff, not the returning players. And I know that Joe Toussaint had only been there for a year, but still, right? Like my assumption was Kirk Kriisa would leave. He's staying. My assumption was Jesse Edwards would leave. He's staying. Instead, Trey Mitchell heads off to Kentucky. Joe Toussaint is headed off down to Texas. And so there is still a lot more now to be sorted out for the Mountaineers, but that's where we're at right now as of 6:45 Central Time on Independence Day. That's kind of what West Virginia's got going on. Obviously, we're going to keep tabs on it because there is more. We're still waiting on James Okonkwo. We're still waiting on Mohamed Wagi and others to announce what they're going to do. Now, that's the other part of it is this roster that I was like, man, if Coach Eiler, the interim head coach, can keep this roster intact, I thought they were in really good shape. Maybe, not like top 15, but maybe top 20, top 25 type team as the season got rolling. Obviously, playing in the Big 12 is always difficult. It's always hard. But I thought they had the type of roster that could compete for at least like a top 4 or 5 spot in the conference. Now, let's get back to the Joe Toussaint side of all of this, because this is about him, not about West Virginia. Keep in mind, he had played 3 years at Iowa before he came to West Virginia last year, is able to make this second transfer without having to get a waiver because the West Virginia players were all allowed to leave after Coach Huggins left. What's interesting to me is that in his lone year at West Virginia last season, Toussaint had grown just about every statistical category over what he did in his career at Iowa. Let me just take you through some of those stats. He averaged 4.8 points in his time at Iowa, 9.4 last year at West Virginia, from 15.6 minutes a game at Iowa up to 21.7 at West Virginia. 3-point shooting, 27.7 at Iowa, up to 32.7% last year. And I know 32.7% itself is not great, but that's 5 percentage points higher. And there's just something about being above 30%. Not only that, but Toussaint did that on more attempts per game. He only averaged 0.8 3-point attempts per game in his career at Iowa, shot 3 of them per game last year at West Virginia. Free throw percentage up 76.6% up to 78.7. That's only a couple percentage points, but more than doubled the amount of free throws he was attempting a game. 1.4 free throw attempts per game in his career at Iowa, up to 3.6 last year at West Virginia. Rebounds, 1.6 up to 2.8. Assists, steals, they kind of stayed the same. The only major category you notice where Toussaint was down last year was in field goal percentage, 40.4% in his time at Iowa, down to 37.4% at West Virginia. Not a major drop, but it is a drop. So if you're Grant McCasland and the Texas Tech staff, you are really hoping you get the West Virginia version of Joe Toussaint, not the Iowa version. And you expect that's what it will be, because that was this most recent season. And so we'll keep our eyes on that. Now, for Texas Tech, McCasland has been bringing in a lot. I already mentioned that they got Cambridge in. They landed Cambridge's teammate from Arizona State, Warren Washington. They got Chance McMillian from Grand Canyon, Darion Williams from Nevada, Kyron Lindsey from Georgia. And so here's the thing. Pop Isaacs is going to be the starting point guard for the Red Raiders, or should be. The question is, how will Toussaint battle with these other guys to be the starting shooting guard? And so that we'll have to wait and see on that. I would imagine he'll probably win that battle. But again, not a very prolific 3-point shooter. And so we'll keep our eyes on that. Well, Toussaint, as we've already said, was not the only college basketball transfer to commit on Independence Day. Paul Mulcahy did the same thing, and we'll talk about him in just a second. But first, this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to making a prediction on who's going to hit the first home run of a game. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Beyond that, when you win, you get paid instantly. So there's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Hey, I want to thank you everydayers for being here with us. If you're a guest or if it's your first time, man, welcome in. Come be part of this family of Locked On College Basketball. We're having a blast over here talking about what I think is the most fun and greatest game on the planet, and I love it at the college level. I hope that's you too. If you want to tune into the show again tomorrow on Thursday, my co-host Andy Patton will be leading the way along with Leaf Tulane, who joins us just about every week to bring you some great transfer portal news. All right, next, Paul Mulcahy also committed on Tuesday, and he is headed from Rutgers all the way across the country to Washington to play for Mike Hopkins. And so, listen, he leaves Rutgers, Mulcahy does, after 4 years, 121 games, and 81 starts. Going to use that COVID eligibility to be part of a multitude of veteran guys committing to the Huskies. Now, I'll just say it this way. If it were me, and it's not, but if it were, and I were leaving my current school in Rutgers, I'd go somewhere that had a really good opportunity for me to win at a high level in my final year of college. I don't know that Washington is that. I don't know that Washington's not that, because the Pac-12 is like, you could do it, right? And ultimately, he also visited Xavier and Notre Dame. I know Notre Dame's a school in transmission. I'm going on a road trip tomorrow. Maybe I'm thinking about my car. Program in transition from Mike Bray to Micah Shrewsbury. So I get that. But Xavier, honestly, they're part of a really, really competitive Big East. That might have even been a better play there. But here's the other thing. Per Adam Zagoria on Zag's blog, schools like West Virginia had reached out with interest. Kentucky, Gonzaga, Kansas, Michigan, K-State, Pittsburgh, all of these had reached out. Almost every one of those, man, West Virginia, I get that, not going there now, but just about all the rest of those, you have a much higher probability of winning at a higher level. Now, as you look at that list that I just named off, some of those, he probably wouldn't have been the starter there, Paul Mulcahy. Some of those he didn't want to go to because of the Big Ten side of things, like Michigan, for example. From everything I've heard, didn't want to go to another Big Ten school. So listen, with Pac-12 and with Washington's veteran age, though, maybe they can make some noise. We'll just have to wait and see. So instead of opting for maybe a better winning opportunity, Mulcahy becomes the 6th transfer in for Mike Hopkins this offseason. And again, 4 of those 6 are 5th-year guys. So a lot of age. They have gotten old this offseason. Now, for those unfamiliar with Mulcahy's game, maybe you've heard a lot about him just because he's one of the higher profile names left in the transfer portal, maybe even the highest best backcourt player available before he just came off the board. Would definitely be in that conversation at the very least. But Mulcahy is not necessarily a high-level scorer, but he does do a little bit of everything. Let's take his junior and senior years kind of combined at Rutgers, because that's a little bit more instructive in the years in which he was getting more playing time and is more, I think, a microcosm of who he will be at Washington than his freshman and sophomore years. So these last 2 years at Rutgers averaged 8.7 points a game, shot 42.7% from the field, 35.7% from three, 74.6 from the free throw line, averaged 3.9 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1.3 steals. Not really much in terms of blocks, which I'd like to see more blocks from him, but had 0.3 per game. The dude's a 6'6" guard. I think he should be blocking more shots, but whatever. And then 2.3 turnovers. I'd also like to see that number come down. But outside of those couple things, I like that he gives you essentially at least over 4 points, right at 4 rebounds, and over 5 assists per game. You love that out of a big guard. He's also going to add solid defense. He's not somebody that I would talk about as an elite level defender, but is a very good defender. He's also going to bring like veteran savvy, like we talked about. He's going to bring grit and toughness. He's a New Jersey kid. So taking that over to the West Coast. Another thing I would like to see a little bit more out of Mulcahy when he gets to Washington is getting to the free throw line more. As a big guard, get into the lane, attack. But for his career, he's only averaged 1.5 free throw attempts per game. That's got to jump. Well, here's where things get interesting for me. The choice of going to Washington beyond are they going to win, is Xavier Wheeler has already transferred there from Kentucky. You might remember this. And that is a little, I know they're different sized guards. And so you might look at them and say, well, yeah, they're different. But like, I don't necessarily see the fit with the two of them. Keep in mind, you got Keon Brooks. And, so how does this backcourt all come together? Because neither Xavier Wheeler nor Paul Mulcahy is a high level, high volume 3-point shooter. I said that Mulcahy is a solid 3-point shooter, 36.4% for his career, but has only averaged 1.7 attempts per a game. And so, again, great percentage. It's respectable. You got to respect his shot, but on fewer than 2 attempts per game. It's not like he's lighting it up in terms of volume. He's never attempted more than 75 3-pointers in a season, has Paul Mulcahy. As Wheeler himself, he's got a little bit higher volume, 2.1 3-point attempts for his career, but he's shooting under 30% on those. And so in this day and age, I just don't see how you can roll those two dudes out to play together, right? As our friend Tristan Freeman from Busting Brackets said, both are more pass first without a ton of scoring. And that's just not a good combination to see them both on the floor. So it's going to be interesting to see. Right now, unless something different happens, I would imagine only one of them is going to start. I would project Mulcahy over Wheeler, similar to what happened at Kentucky last year. Like Cason Wallace eventually kind of beat out Xavier Wheeler. It took Wheeler getting an injury for Coach Cal to realize it, but finally when he did, they kept that going. So, man, how would they be successful together in the backcourt? I don't know that they would. Obviously, as we've said, the height is a difference. Mulcahy's 6'6", 6'7". Xavier Wheeler's 5'10". And so, that kind of helps, but man, I don't know. So, and here's another part of the backcourt is Keon Menafield left to go to Arkansas, left Washington to go there. So obviously there's his minutes and all that to make of it. Now, in terms of Mulcahy going to Washington, here's what does make a ton of sense to me. Mike Hopkins, who was he under? And I honestly thought he would be the next coach of, is Jim Boeheim at Syracuse and runs that 2-3 zone. I think Mulcahy is made to be part of the Syracuse zone, right? And so he will be long, he'll be disruptive up at the top of that thing, gonna make it really difficult on opposing guards to get things going. So, when the USC backcourt comes to town, man, I'm going to see how that goes. That'll be really, really interesting. By the way, poor Pittsburgh, they've been looking for a veteran ball handler. They were in on Paul Mulcahy. They were in on Joe Toussaint and lost out on both of the dudes we're talking about today. That is a tough blow for Jeff Capel. And so we'll have to see where they turn next. Now, to wrap up today's show, got some updates on the transfer portal and how the window might be shrinking. We'll discuss that in just a second. Okay, talking about the transfer portal window, for those who are unaware, this was the first season of actually having a specified window with a beginning and an end for the transfer portal. Well, news came out last week about some proposed changes to this. And again, it was last week, but Andy and I wanted to make sure to catch us all up to speed on it in case others hadn't looked at it or thought about it. And we wanted to give you my thoughts on it. So just very basically with this, the Division I Council is proposing changes that would take the transfer portal from the 60 days that it is right now and literally slice it in half down to 30 days. So if you'll recall, the way this worked, and again, this was the first year of it, is that in every sport, the transfer portal window would open the day after the postseason selection announcements for that sport. So for us in college basketball, we had selection Sunday on Sunday, March 12th. And then the next day, Monday, March 13th was when it opened and ran for 60 days till Thursday, May 11th. Or like, just to get another example, in college football, right? The Sunday after all the conference championship games are played, they have an announcement show on ESPN where they announce the CFP pairings, the college football playoff pairings, as well as all the bowl games. And it's that next day, that Monday, when the transfer portal opened for football. And so the proposal is to take this down to 30 days. And folks, just hear me say, I love this. I think it's a brilliant idea because, man, I was trying to think of jokes of like, here's all these things that lasted for a shorter time than the transfer portal window did this year. And I know there's probably some people out there who would say, No, you don't go fixing this after you don't go changing this after 1 year. You haven't really seen, you need more of a sample size to see if it's the right thing or not. But I say if it's too long and you already think it's broke, go and fix it. And that's what the NCAA is working at doing. And here, hand up, I am somebody that has been pretty hard on the NCAA for their leadership, or quite frankly, lack thereof. But I also want to praise them when it seems like they're doing something wise. And in this case, I think making an adjustment to this is wise. I'm a person who in my life, I've really struggled with when I'm creating a system or a program or something. I want to make sure it's perfect and all right and neat and tidy, and then roll it out with nothing that needs to be fixed or updated or changed. I've grown in that. And finally, I'm somebody who's starting to get to the point where I say, no, what we need to do is like put our best foot forward with this thing, but then get it out there and then learn what the tweaks and fixes and adjustments we need to make are. You start something, you see what works, you see what doesn't, and you adjust accordingly. And that's what the NCAA is doing here. They made a plan for the transfer portal window. They saw that there was an issue without regulation on the bookends of this thing, and they put a plan in place. It's too long, quite frankly. And so they're wanting to shrink it. So having the windows, right move. Shortening them, the correct tweak. I applaud the NCAA for this. But I also am hopeful that as part of this proposal by the D1 Council, that they will also change not just the length, but the starting time. I did not like it starting the day after Selection Sunday. It's just too much for teams, for coaching staffs that are in any postseason, whether it's the NCAA tournament, the NIT, or the CBI. And we saw examples of that this year where teams opted not to play in the NIT, presumably, well, at least in the case of North Carolina, Hubert Davis said that it was so that they could get out ahead of the transfer portal and make sure they weren't in the same boat that they were this year. And we obviously know that North Carolina, things did not go well for them this year. And so I don't want programs to have to decide between, do we play in the postseason or do we get a jump start on the transfer portal? Obviously, teams in the NCAA tournament aren't going to do that, but like coaches should not have to be balancing. All right, I got to prepare for this Sweet 16 matchup, and then I got to prepare for whichever of the two teams it is we might play in the Elite Eight if we're fortunate enough to make it that far. That's just this time of year in March, you should be able to focus on the biggest moment in college basketball, the celebration of what we all look forward to all year long, and that is the greatest postseason that we have in American sports, March Madness. But if the transfer portal is already open, can't be doing that. So I fully hope that the NCAA not only adjusts the length of the transfer portal, but also the start time. So again, let me remind you, this year it opened on March 13th, closed on May 11th. What about this? What if you waited until the day after the national championship game as one proposal? I've got another one that I actually like a little bit better, but the national championship game is always on a Monday, way too late night. Can we just move that up like 2 hours? That would be perfect. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. So if you did it the day after the national championship, and it was that 30-day shortened window that we're looking at, this year it would have been open from Tuesday, April 4th through Wednesday, May 3rd. To me, that's much better and isn't all that much remember this year it closed on May 11th. So kind of the calendar time is only about a week different in that scenario. But what I actually like better and that I would propose is not just waiting a day later, but let's wait a week later. Because if we do it the next day on Tuesday, then Tuesday becomes a struggle for, are we talking about celebrating the national champions and everything that's going on there? Or are we looking at transfer portal stuff? I think we need the rest of that week to just celebrate the season that it's been, get everyone's way too early top 25 lists out of the way. And then the next month, you give it the weekend. And then that next Monday, you open the transfer portal and let it run for 30 days. That just feels like a better calendar to me, right? And so I know I'm not the czar of college basketball, but doesn't that make more sense, right? And so if that had been the way we did it this year, then the portal would have opened on Monday, April 10th, and it would have been open through Tuesday, May 9th, only 2 days shorter in the calendar than this year's portal closed. And this option, I think, would be the way to go. So I'm really curious to see how all this plays out. Not only is the shorter window adopted, but also when do we start it? And so really, really hopeful on that. And a part of this with the D1 Council is they said from the data they've been looking at is that most of the people that jumped into the portal did it right, within a short way. They don't need essentially 2 months worth of days to figure this out. They can go ahead and do it. And I know there's going to be pushback on, well, what about the dudes sitting around waiting for 3 weeks while the NCAA tournament goes on to announce that they're committing? Well, or that announce that they're transferring. So what? They can go ahead, they can know it, and their coaching staff already knows it anyway. And so, and I know there's going to be other pushbacks and things like that, but I just think that is the way to go. And so here's when we'll know the next steps about this. There's going to be various committees that weigh in and get feedback from coaches and players and all that, blah, blah, blah. And then when the D1 Council meets in October, the plan, at least as of right now, is that they will vote on it then. Because of that October date, remember, this isn't just for college basketball. This is for, college football as well, for example. Because of that, I would imagine even if this is voted in, it wouldn't apply to this year or the what would be the 2024 transfer portal window. I think we'd have to wait one more cycle and start it in 2025 so they could get everything in place and do it for the 2024-25 school year. So that's my projection on it. And what I hope will happen and what I think will happen. Would love to know your thoughts. Maybe you've got some good proposals. Let us know so we can talk about that. Folks, thanks again for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch of the day. Everydayers, once again, can't wait for you to tune in tomorrow for Andy and Leaf. They're going to do great stuff there. You can follow the show on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Isaac Schade. The show is at Locked On CBB. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else. You can leave reviews, 5 stars if you would. Hey, don't forget to subscribe. Smash the like button to let us know you're here and leave us your comments on your thoughts on these two guys' commitments and the transfer portal shrinkage, to use a George Costanza word. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and until tomorrow, peace.